So in the talk, another thing, someone requested it too, and I need my memory refreshed on it. What is Plex? I didn't understand this. This is like,
really?
Yeah. Well, I'm dumb. You have to remember, very stupid, and I might have been a little distracted during this portion. I had a 6 Slay the Spire run going, and I looked up and I went, "What is Plex?"
Okay. So I apologize if I didn't. If I didn't do a good enough job.
No, you did a good job. I have the worst ADHD the doctor's ever seen.
Okay, that's fair. So you have to remember, and this is one of the things that I tried to really give some context for in the talk, but it's hard to wrap your head around, is I guess the way I would say it. Nowadays, we just assume, like everybody just assumes, that we have this concept that we can take a set of data like, int x, int y, char star foo or something, right? And put them together in a struct or a class or whatever you want to think of. And then that will be like in memory, it will just be stored that way, and it's very fast for us to access, right? So one way to draw a differentiation here would be to think about, how JavaScript is kind of like, well, it's just this big hash table. It's like if I want to make an object, just a big bag, and I put things in it, and then if I want to get them out, it's going to be like a lookup on like this name, whatever it is, right? And then like maybe the JIT, if it can figure it out, can make it into something that's like a fixed thing in memory, but not necessarily, right? Whereas in C or in Rust or probably in Go, I'm assuming as well, like there's, languages that are kind of made more for compile time, I can say this is the data layout, and then I can just have like a pointer or a handle or a reference or whatever it gets called in that language is like the location in memory where this thing is, and if I want the int x, I can just get it. If I want the int y, I just get it, just with a simple numerical offset. So it's super efficient to talk about this like bundle of data. So what you have to remember, and it's really hard to wrap your head around, like I said, is if you rewind time to 1950, no one had thought of that. That's just not on the table, right? No one had thought that what you want when you're writing like in a higher level language, which they hadn't really even conceived of at that time very much, right? When you're programming a computer, they're like, oh, wait, we could just store like one address in the computer's memory, and we could know how to get to lots of different related pieces of data all bundled together just by using a fixed numerical offset that we know is the same no matter which one of these we're using, right? So you could kind of think of this as like the earliest form of the idea of instantiation. Like I have a definition of a thing, a type, and I'm going to actually have now one of those. And I could make another one if I wanted at a different place in memory, right? And so just to underscore, because again, it's really hard to wrap your head around this because it's just assumed now. Like we don't even think about this at all anymore. It's just like, of course you could do that if you wanted to or whatever, right? Just to underscore how much they didn't know this yet. So Doug T. Ross is this guy who comes up with the concept of a Plex. He's on this team at MIT at this laboratory it's called the Servo Mechanisms Laboratory at the time. It later gets renamed to a different name whose name escapes me, but it's originally called the Servo Mechanisms Laboratory. And what they do is they make like robotic tooling for making like, we would think of it today as 3D printing almost is what they're working on way back in the 50s. Making this stuff for the Air Force and whatever. So it's like DoD stuff, right? So anyway, the idea here is back then, you had like in memory, you had arrays and stuff. So, they would think of it as like, oh, I have an array of integers. They had that concept. So I'm going to think of it as like, I've got a base pointer to an array, and I'm going to get the third element out of that array to get one of the integers. That's the thing everyone's thinking about. Doug Ross publishes a paper. Publishes a paper. This is how much people weren't thinking about this. Saying, hey, I got this idea. What if we flipped the arguments to the hardware array indexer? So that instead of thinking of jumping a fixed size n, like, we're going to go through elements of an array off of a base pointer, what if we flipped it and said, instead what we have is a base pointer and then a flexible offset. So the array is of these larger chunks, and then we just go arbitrary offset inside the sub chunks. So we'll flip it. Instead, we'll flip the fixed offset and the flexible offset part of that. He called it reverse indexing. And then he's like, if we do that, then we can have this thing called a Plex, which is a bunch of related data that's all smushed together, and we can have lots of those, and that way we could just go, oh, let's look at the x coordinate of this thing, and the y coordinate of this thing, and the name of this thing, and they'll all be together, right? And that's what he called a Plex for, it's short for plexus, which I guess, I don't speak Latin, but I guess, if you're a doctor or a lawyer and you do, that I guess means like an interconnected, like a node where things are connected, like that kind of, I don't know, it's like solar plexus might be a use of that term, right? Like a thing where a bunch of things comes together, a node where things come together. And he calls it that because not only did he conceptualize this idea of packing all the things together as the way a program might be operating, but he also figured out that you could augment that thing with stuff like relational links to other things. So the idea of a pointer from one plex to another to say like, this is the point that I am, I'm a line and I have two endpoints and here's pointers to each of those points, right? And those are plexes themselves and so on. So he was imagining this big web of these things, which is exactly how we compute today. Like it is literally how we program today. And he figured this out in 1956.
Okay, so wait, I think I understand this, okay? So, like, for the other people in the chat who are a little slower like myself, so, like, back in the day, if I want to go to a friend's house, I wrote their address down. So I got an address, get to a friend's house. I got another friend, I write their address down again. I go to their house. However, I want to get to the McDonald's. I don't want to write down how to get to the McDonald's from the friend's house. I know it's 2 blocks up. I know there's an Arby's 2 blocks that way, and there's a Wendy's 2 blocks that way. So I just store the one address, and I know, get to a friend's house, and then I've got Arby's here. I've got my McDonald's over there. I got my blank Wendy's over there. And I'm storing less data. 2 blocks up is a lot better than like a full address to get somewhere. Well, right, chat, this makes perfect sense, right?
Well, this is a bit of a tortured metaphor, but I'll try to run with it. You don't even have to store anything, because the point is that it's as if all of your friends' houses all had an Arby's 2 blocks up. So you just know when you go to any friend's house, you go up 2 blocks. You don't have to store that information because it's a given. And that's the magic of a Plex or a struct, as we now call it. Typically in like C parlance, we would call it a struct. It's basically saying, look, if I just know the block layout and that's compiled directly into the program, then I no longer have to do all this work to gather the data. It's all right there. And furthermore, I can easily reference one or the other. Like I can just, like you said, I can just say the address of a friend's house, and now you also know the address of the Arby's, right? And again, in this weird world we're living in, all friends' houses have Arby's 2 blocks up for them, which I don't know if that's good. Like, I don't know if all your friends, I don't know if there's that many Arby's that should be in the world, but let's say that there is. Everyone likes roast beef a lot, and so that's what's happening. Then, yeah.
For those that don't know, I believe this was during the 40s. Computers didn't even have the concept of an indirect address for quite some times, or an indirect reads, being able to use a memory spot as a means to read into something else. And so this was already, like, we're not even that far from a world where they're just like, wait a second, we could read from one location into another location. We could just store something that could read somewhere else all the time. So, like, this is only on the heels of that. So it's actually,
like I said, he actually was sort of saying, look, what you could do is use this instruction that these machines have for array indexing and flip the parameters, and it will do this kind of Plex. So he's literally having to like backfit this idea onto the hardware because the hardware wasn't really designed to do this, right?
Yeah.
So that's how not like thinking in this direction it was at the time.
Yeah. Well, it's also just it was so new still, right? Like this whole,
and so,
it's just like people even have this concept of like. I think it's so easy to take for granted how much we have kind of pre-built into our head on this.
Yeah, and so what people were, so other competing, there are other ideas at the time too. So Lisp is contemporaneous with this. They're actually both kind of doing this work in like the mid-1950s, 1956, 7, 8. Lisp was taking like a different approach. they still want to do stuff like bags of data where we kind of know, like, oh, the first one is this, the second one is this, the third one is this. But in Lisp, since everything is treated as like these sort of like uniform elements that kind of get concatenated together, you had to do stuff like, okay, I know I need to hop 3 elements down in my list, right, to get to this particular element of it, right? Which is way less efficient with the way that Lisp is constructed. And so actually one of the things that Doug Ross does in his first paper he publishes, because he has the idea in 1956, he publishes a paper on it in 1960, which by the way is the same year that like Lisp published their paper. So it's like right there, these are both at the same time. McCarthy publishes the primary paper on Lisp in 1960 as well. And he actually kind of, he disses Lisp a little bit, right, in the paper. He's like, yeah, you know, these guys working on Lisp. Because remember, McCarthy's at MIT, Ross is at MIT, everyone's at MIT. They all know what's up, right? He basically says, like, yeah, Lisp, it's inefficient. Because I want to get that third element, I got to go through each thing. And also, when you're storing it, it's inefficient. Because you have to store the linkages between these things to treat them as these uniform manipulable lists. It's like, I don't need to do that when I know my layout. Once I've decided on the layout for this thing, I can just fix it in place. And this turns out to be an incredibly powerful concept. So powerful, it's the building block of like every program I write today. And a lot of people, that's true too. Obviously, some languages not so much. Like I said, JavaScript is more of a language that's more Lisp-like. It's saying like, well, an object is kind of just a handle, and then there's just a big hash table, and I can just throw anything in that I want. That has a like nice flexibility to it, but it has costs, right? It has efficiency costs to it. And so what Doug Ross is really doing with this Plex is coming up with this idea of the more efficient version for when you don't need that flexibility.
Okay, we have actually a pretty interesting question from the chat, which is, did they have creatine back then?
They did, I'm sure, because I feel like Doug Ross must have been drinking it. Because I don't know how he came up with so much stuff. We're not even done yet with Plexes, including in the first paper.
I need more creatine.
The very first paper on Plexes, he also nailed discriminated unions. So the idea that you could have a type field in there that would basically change how this thing was processed or what some of the data was used for, and virtual functions, basically. The idea of a function pointer was in the original Plex paper. He's like, look, inside this Plex, we could also just put a jump, like an address in the Plex, so that when the thing comes to process it, it can read that address and jump to a subroutine that will process this Plex efficiently, specifically, and do things specific only to this Plex, right? So he crushes it all. He's just like, welcome to the future. Here's my 1960s paper that tells you all of the tools that everyone will use in the year 2025, pretty much down to the layout in memory. And then, like, for some reason, he doesn't just mic drop and walk off stage. I would have been like, all right, y'all, I'm done. You're welcome for the future. I'm Doug T. Ross. Thank you. Good night, Cleveland, or whatever, right? Like that kind of thing.
This guy literally foresaw all of modern computing, like whether intentional or by accident. He foresaw everything, and that's because you pretty much described everything we use today.
Correct. Like, he got all the building blocks. And the thing that really... Oh, and by the way, he also nailed the free store. He had this thing called beads where it was like, oh, if we take these plexes and we sort them by, like, their size, we can have free lists that just are batches of these so that we won't fragment memory. And then he comes up with the arena. He's like, we could also just batch free the entire group of the plexes, right?
That's
so, like,
crazy.
No, the dude is like next level. And here's the thing that sucks, because people don't frickin' read. They write histories of these things and completely miss this because they don't bother to read. They just go to Wikipedia and then they type that out in their book, and you get a completely bogus history that leaves these people out. But he's the guy who actually figured this crap out, and it's awesome. So, like, I'm on team. I want to, like, get Doug T. Ross back into the Wikipedia pages, people, because this dude... He actually figured it out. He kind of went a little crazy later.
A lot of them
so
go
there's
crazy.
That.
As it tends to happen when you invent a lot of brand new things.
But, you know, what can
rock
you do?
stars die young. Great
That's right,
programmers
baby.
die crazy.
That's right,
you know?
baby.
I mean, I don't know what happened later in life. I don't know what direction he took, but in the 60s, he invented the discriminated union. I don't support that. That sounds like something you invented in the 60s. Like, not for me. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. Also, I love you have to say the T every time. Okay.
Yeah, Doug T. Ross. Doug T.
Ross. If you have a middle letter like that, that means
it's like
more
Samuel
powerful.
L. Jackson.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
not
Any relation
just
to Bob
Samuel
Ross?
Jackson. Like the middle letter is important.
So if all these things have come true, I now need to find out what has not come true, and I got to get on Polymarket, make a bet that it's gonna come true. Like, what was he wrong about then? He did not have a 100% success rate. If he's the Nostradamus of tech, that means he's probably 99% wrong.
He's from the future. He's from the future if he got everything right.
That's a good question. I mean, maybe if you looked at some, like, afterwards, he started to think that plexes, and I kind of understand why, but, like, he started to think of plexes as, like, the nature of the universe. Do you see what I'm going with this? Like, he was like, oh, the entire world is plexes.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That's like all he
like,
sees
right?
is just plexes. Everything's a plex.
Yeah. So, like, it kind of went that way. So I don't know that it is. I mean, I'm just not for me to say. I don't have Doug T. Ross levels of future.
I'm not smart enough to see the world.
He's
like
kind of on a different level. So I don't want to say that they're not, but it certainly hasn't quite turned out that way yet. Anyway.
So he also invented simulation theory.
Kind of. He was definitely on team simulation theory, although I don't know if he invented it. There's probably other people who were pushing that pretty early, right?
Well, what's his name? Bolstrom, what's his name? He's out there mad at somewhere. It says on his Wikipedia article he made, and he's like, what? Doug T. Ross, no.
Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to the diss tracks between Doug T. Ross.
Creatine
Well,
is a
remember,
hell
if
of a drug.
you the first human to like actually officially create or discover simulation theory, discover, not create, like that's going to be the AI's one of their best friends. Obviously, you're going to become like you're the first one to discover it, so it's a big deal because you're going to get plucked out when they say, "Hey, we're going to do a wipe, do a new experiment." They go, "Oh, good job, you figured it out." You get pulled up with just one.
Yeah, that's a good point. Doug T. Ross is maybe he figured all that out, and he's just angling to be scooped.
Exactly. He wants to be scooped. I will say I did lose a friend to group theory very similarly to this problem where they got so deep into group theory.
Did you just say I lost a friend to group theory?
Yes, I lost them. This is what it was like. Listen, it was like Haskell. No, not just Haskell. Group theory. Hey, I got to go study math in Poland. And then when you hang out, it's like, dude, we're a discriminated union and this drink is a tag. And you're like, dude, what is going on? And then he stopped talking about programming anymore. And he only was talking about like, don't you see? It's all groups, man. And like, you're at Chipotle and it's just like, don't you see? This is, and I'm like, I don't care.
Think about the ontology of this burrito.
Yes, he last I heard he moved to Russia to do math. And that's never good when you're going to Russia for math. So.
All right.
That is expert level mathing, though. Like, that is really where the math goes to math.
Hey, do you want to learn how to code? Do you want to become a better back-end engineer? Well, you got to check out boot.dev. Now, I personally have made a couple courses from them. I have live walkthroughs free available on YouTube of the whole course. Everything on boot.dev you can go through for free. But if you want the gamified experience, the tracking of your learning and all that, then you got to pay up the money. But hey, go check them out. It's awesome. Many content creators you know and you like make courses there. Boot.dev/prime for 25% off.